Susan, and welcome back, everyone. A very big special welcome to Minister Champagne. We shared the stage about 2 years ago to the Fireside Chat. It was really exciting then, but times are very different then. And there's a very different feel in the air right now. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. So great to have you here. I did work very hard to get you here. I don't boast, but on this one I will.
You're very good. You're very good, I can say.
Well, I don't like to use the word stalking, but it was borderline stalking.
It felt like that a bit, for a good reason, you know, a very good reason.
I heard he was in a car in Brunswick with Mr. LeBlanc, and I text someone, now's the time, call him right now. He's in a car, and you'll get his attention. So great that you can do it. Before we get into some questions, is there anything you'd like to say to the gathering coming up this morning?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. It's good they asked me to bring a bit of energy in the room, so I'll try to do that this morning. But really, really excited. You know, I landed yesterday in a big summer day that you had here in St. John's. It was great. Saw a lot of people in the industry, but to all of you, I think the way they describe it to me, this is like the Super Bowl of energy conference here in St. John's. So you're really at the right place at a time where Charlene and I, and I'm happy to go. We can go macro and then dive into why I'm so optimistic about what I see here in Newfoundland and Labrador in Atlantic Canada. Just last week or the week before, we had a G7 meeting in Europe with finance ministers, central bank governors, and the International Energy Agency. And I can go on to that to give you a bit of a sense of where the world is going and what we see and how I think in the context. You're right, you know, 2 years ago, the tone was very different. I think the tone at the top has really empowered a lot of you to really see how Canada, how we transform what we have always known and seen as an energy superpower, as the trusted energy partner to our allies around the world. And I can tell you that when we were with, and I know you're supposed to ask more than one question, so I'll try to be brief in a way.
I've been warned.
But I just want to give a sense that when we were there with the International Energy Agency, and that should be something that everyone in this room would probably appreciate, is that because of what we're seeing in the world now, and in the world's fatty barrel, the most severe energy crisis we have ever seen, is that there is a redesign of the energy architecture around the world. And I think in that new world, Canada has a place and a role to play as a trusted energy partner in the world where the word trust is probably what matters the most. You know, people look for stability, predictability, and trust in how they're going to be engaging with energy partners. And I think in this new world, Canada has certainly, in Newfoundland and Labrador, because of the proximity to Europe, because of the geography, and let's be clear, you know, we'll find a way forward on the Strait of Hormuz, but I've been saying on a number of interviews that, you know, as far as I know, geography doesn't change much, and people don't change that much either. So that reality of the choke point is always going to be there one way or the other. And in other choke points, if you look at the Financial Times, they had a very great article about the different straits around the world for energy. And that's why when you put Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador, which has, you know, deep expertise, excellence, and know-how in oil and gas, energy, I would say broadly, is part of the DNA of this province in Atlantic Canada. In Canada as a whole, I think that we can play a key role in that new world. And I would just finish by saying, when I was foreign minister, you would expect us to talk about national security. But now I can tell you as finance minister and central bank governors, the nexus, and I can come to that in more detail, between food security, energy security, economic security, and national security has never been greater. So everything we do now as a component of national security, and in that new world where there's a lot of challenges, and you know, I would say the world is facing probably some of a period which is quite unprecedented. Some would go back to the end of after the Second World War or the fall of the Berlin Wall. We're in this period of great change, but it's also a period of great redesign where I think that we can play a big role. And I'll just finish by saying it's true that if we go out there, people feel there's a lot of wind in the windshield, not only in a figurative way, but in reality, you see the speed, scope, and scale of change is quite unprecedented. It goes from geopolitics, geoeconomics, supply chain, but it's also technology like AI, quantum, and cyber. And in this world, you know, what you find, interestingly, in all our discussion, is somewhat a feel of loss of control for people. And therefore, one way to address that is to focus on what we can control. And one of the things you've been doing very well, and I want to applaud you and I'll ask people to applaud you, is that you've been kind of that beacon of stability and vision and foresight at NL, in the Energy NL conference. You've been there during easier days and more difficult days, but one thing you've always reminded each and every one of us, the key role that this province and this region can play. So big round of applause to you, Charlene, for your leadership.
There has been a lot of change, and with change, there needs to be the change in leadership changed things too, and the major step change there. Since Prime Minister Carney has come into government, you supported Bay du Nord with the UNCLOS. That took care of that uncertainty, and uncertainty is an investment killer. The agreement with Alberta, the emissions cap is gone, the electricity strategy, LNG out west. It's really, really different time. And as you said, Newfoundland and Labrador, we have it all. We have the oil, the gas, we have the wind. If you were here yesterday, you know we have the wind. We have the hydro, the largest hydroelectric development in the world. So can you just speak a little bit about that step change? Because people have been asking me, how do you feel about conference? And my word was giddy. The Premier was up this morning, and to hear the Premier talk about the relationship with the federal government and how this government supports our industry, taking down barriers to advance our industry. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's been very different in the past for us, and everyone in this room has felt the challenges, and now they feel the optimism. So just maybe a word or two on that.
Well, first of all, one sign of leadership, when you can convince your daughter to attend your conference, it's a great sign of leadership. So I know your daughter's in the room, so trust me, that's great leadership to start. I would say, yeah, the tone at the top has changed. And you're right with Premier. I was just with Tony, if I may call him, Premier Wickman. We're just together. And actually, Bay du Nord is a great example. Because of my background, like you said, 20 years in Europe, and I know there's some colleagues who were from Aberdeen in the room. I used to be based in London with big operation in Aberdeen in the energy sector. But Bay du Nord is a prime example of that, how you position Canada as a sustainable and responsible partner of choice when you talk about new development. And I remember, you know, Anders happened to know the global CEO of Equinor from other days. And you know what made a big difference is that we spoke with one voice. Whether he spoke to the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, to myself as the Minister of Finance, to my colleague, Minister Hodgson of Energy, it felt like we offered like a concierge service to him, and that really made Canada special in a way. I mean, it starts with our workers, and yesterday I was on the new docks, and I spent time with PAL Aerospace and other Oceanics. You know, what we have here starts with the people. We have deep expertise, and that's why you have people from around the world in the room, because people who have been in that industry, in the oil and gas, and those who do offshore, know the talent, know-how, and expertise and excellence of the people we have in the province. You know, so you start with that, and secondly, you start also with the opportunity that has been opening up, and Bay du Nord for me is the poster child of what the world wants to see from Canada. So going at speed and scale not seen before, making sure that we provide opportunities to people in industry here locally in Newfoundland and Labrador. And then, and I like in your title, The Atlantic and the World, is connecting to our partners around the world, because here we've been blessed by geography many ways. We have access to offshore oil and gas, but we also have access to key markets. And a number of you in the room would have seen, we just signed a partnership on the West Coast with Woodfibre with Germany. Just imagine for a minute, what can we sign in terms of long-term energy arrangement with our partners in Europe at a time where, like I said, and this is really the core of my message today. For those of you, and I saw some are younger people in the room who are just entering in the industry, but you're probably living in the new golden age of opportunities. Charlene said it well. You look at this province, we have critical minerals, we have renewable energy. We talk about offshore wind and onshore. You're talking about offshore oil and gas. You're talking about hydroelectricity. And I was with the Premier, and you're right. I said, Premier, you have it all. You look at your toolbox in the world, which is looking for trusted energy partner. And a lot of people have said, energy is a proxy to growth. And oftentimes we have said before, demography is destiny. And I'd like to say energy is destiny. If you can produce, for example, these green electrons here to attract more investment, gone are the day where we're just going to do exploration. We want to do transformation. When you talk about oil and gas and what we can do, I think that the example of Bay du Nord, and at the speed we did it, is going to be looked at by other oil majors. And the Premier was already telling me the level of interest we have seen. And I've been a decade doing that. And, oftentimes I said, we need each and every one of you, because there's very few people waking up in the morning thinking about Canada. I know you do, Charlene. I know a number of you do, but we need to bring our story to the world. I often like to say, I like to brag, maybe sometimes the bragger-in-chief of Canada, to really say about what is the story. You look at ourselves today in a world where you can look at the challenges. I like to look at the opportunities. We have the skilled people. We have very strong industry here in our country and in this province. We have access to critical mineral. We're going to double down on energy. We said we're going to double our energy grid by 2050. And we're lucky enough to be the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations, which basically give us access to, 1.5 billion consumers. And at a time where the word trust comes always in our discussion globally, I like the way you put it between the Atlantic and the world, because that's really where I think we can play it. And I think projects like Bay du Nord is a prime example of us working at our very best for the province, for the country, and I would say for our partners around the world. And I think if we have 800 people this year, or 1,200, you said, I bet you that 5 years from now, this place might not be big enough to attract all the people that you're going to have to your conference. Because my dream, and I hope your dream, is to make sure that in this new energy ecosystem, St. John's and Newfoundland and Labrador is at the core of the new energy security architecture in the world, and I think we can make it together.
We sure can. And yesterday, the province announced their gas strategy, so another tremendous amount of potential there. 30 trillion cubic feet of gas. Just to put it in perspective, the Sable field in Nova Scotia was sanctioned on 3 trillion cubic feet. So a lot of opportunity there. But just to move to renewables for a moment, hydro, major potential here in our respective home provinces, Newfoundland, Labrador, and Quebec. What role do you see for the federal government to help move that along? You announced your strategy. Do you see a financial role, perhaps?
Well, I see that, and I've been very public. When I come here, they bring me to all the TV station and radio stations. So I've been talking about that this morning in a bit, and say, for me, there's a win-win-win there. And unbeknown to me, it's kind of the same words than the Premier have been using. He was telling me after I did this interview. I think it's a win for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. It can be a win for the province of Quebec, and it's clearly a win for Canada. And the reason is that most of our energy grid and infrastructure has been focused north-south, and now we're looking east-west. I think we're learning that if we want to be more resilient, we need to reorganize our energy system, even in our own country. And for me, I see that as a nation-building exercise. I mean, we have the expertise, we have the resources, we have the market as well. And those who are going to be producing more electricity are going to win in the economy of the 21st century. If you look at the digital economy, for example, the electric stack, as we call it, everything is going more towards electric. So therefore, electricity is going to become a key commodity or proxy for growth. And I was saying to the Premier, I'm old enough to recall that some projects we could not land in Newfoundland and Labrador, nor in Quebec for that matter, because at the time where they came to us, we did not have enough energy to supply them with the kind of megawatt they were wanting. So I was saying, Premier, we have a chance to put past differences behind and build a better future together. You're going to bring students. You have some younger people in the room. I think what they're expecting from us is really to move from positions to what's our best interest. And certainly our best interest, if you want to attract investments in Atlantic Canada, in Canada and in the province, we need to be able to show that we get it from all angles. You mentioned hydroelectricity, offshore oil and gas. We're talking about onshore, offshore wind. What I would like to see is that when people think of us as an energy superpower, they would think of Newfoundland and Labrador as an energy superpower jurisdiction where we have it all. And therefore, I certainly believe that we have a window of opportunity. When these windows open, you should take them. We have seen too many projects, where there's a window, but we miss the window and then they get delayed. And when they get delayed, well, there's different realities that come into place. I really believe that this is a great opportunity for Atlantic Canada, for the province Newfoundland Labrador, to really work together, put our differences aside, and turn that into a win-win-win strategy, which I think that's what people expect from us. People understand that this is a unique moment in the history of our generation. And when you have momentum, you need to keep it and get to the finishing line. And that's what I hear from the Premier, and certainly will be helping to make that a reality. Because I think 10 years when we're going to do the conference, 20 years from now, people are going to look back and say what we've done with respect to offshore oil and gas, but what we've done for hydroelectricity is going to write a new chapter in terms of growth and possibilities and opportunities for the people of this province.
And Michael Sabia was on the stage here last year, and now he's Privy Council head. So again, if I know you're not going to say it here on the stage, but we're always interested if the federal government, if there's things they can help move it along financially. I've been very persistent in advocating to the federal government, and I say I, Energy NL and our members, looking at things like investment tax credits. That you're the finance minister now, so the 8.5% stake that Canada took in Hibernia years ago, and interestingly, we have Elizabeth Wademan, who's going to be our keynote speaker on Thursday. She's the CEO of CDEF, who manages the 8.5% stake. Do you envision the federal government doing anything like that in the future again, whether it's oil and gas, which you did take a big leap helping with UNCLOS, whether it's hydro or oil and gas? Is there a role for the federal government to play? Is there an investment tax credit being considered?
Yeah, you see, she's persistent, she's asking me.
I've asked for 8 years.
This is Chatham House with 5 cameras rolling, so... No, what I would say, you're right. I mean, if you look at the investment tax credit, forgive me to always go back to the G7, but we are by far the most competitive jurisdiction when it comes to the investment tax credit and a clean growth tax credit that we have put in place. And just to give you an example, for the finance people in the room, the meter, what we call the marginal effective tax rate, which is basically the tax rate for new investment. By the way, if you want a headline, Canada has the lowest marginal effective tax rate for new investments of all the G7 countries, 3% lower than the United States of America. So if you're investing today in Canada, it's the most competitive tax jurisdiction. So that is already a start, because we realized that we needed to make sure that we are very competitive, and I would say we're the most in the G7. Now, when you say about us being part of a new chapter, I think the Canada Strong Fund is responding a bit to that. When we say we're going to have our own national sovereign wealth fund, I think it's a game changer for the country. We've seen that in a number of Nordic countries, and we've seen the returns over decades, and it's really been a pillar of success for many. And we wanted to replicate that, is kind of creating collective wealth for the country, investing in projects of national interest in Canadian companies at the same time, and allowing Canadian, that's a look at the international press, They say this is so Canadian. They create their first sovereign national wealth fund, but at the same time, they allow private investors to join in so that everyone has a feel that they can own a piece of the action, which I think is great, so that people, unless you're a qualified investor, these big projects of national interest seem a bit far, unless you have specialized investment product. But for everyone who wants to have a piece of the action, I think this is going to be the kind of vehicle that can look at some of these attractive investment and see how we can support them and create collective wealth. You're right. We have the chance to. I'll give you just an example, because perspective always helps to, position where we are. When we did the first budget, the Prime Minister and I, one of the things I looked is that what is the largest infrastructure plan in the G7? And most of the people would have looked at Germany as the largest economy in Europe, one of the largest country, very major economy. And you look at their infrastructure plan was 500 billion euros over 12 years, investing in key growth element, infrastructure, housing, productivity, and innovation. If you look at budget 2025, when I say it's generational, ours is 425 billion over 5 years on a cash basis, which I would put to you, we have the largest infrastructure plan of the G7. And we did exactly what the International Monetary Fund would have said. When they single out, there's only 2 countries, when we were in Washington, that they highlighted. They said there's only 2 countries you should really look at. It's Canada and Germany. Both have AAA credit rating. Both have decided to invest in key driver of growth, housing, same thing, housing, infrastructure, productivity, innovation, and defense. And both are going to lead in terms of growth. And if you look at the growth, and I know some of you have seen the latest number, but I'm very confident about the strength of the Canadian economy. If you look at the IMF projection for this year, Canada will be growing twice as much as the United Kingdom, twice as much as Germany, twice as much as Japan, and Italy. So we are clearly on a growth trajectory because of the investment we've done, and at the same time tackling what I would say is the main concern of people, which is affordability. And I think this is very relevant, because what you see in the world in terms of challenges has translated in beyond into an affordability issue, whether it's the price of home, the price of gas, the price of food. And that is the real challenge. That's why in this province, I think, with the projects you've been putting forward, and under your leadership, you're putting the province on a growth trajectory that will allow the province and Canada to be able to invest in our future, but at the same time, bring people along with us, because I would say a lot of people are concerned by the end of the month and the end of the week, which is really the core of what you've seen. Is that when I was saying why I started with the macro impact, is that what we've seen more and more is that no one is immune from the global challenges you're seeing, because they've been translating in pretty much all our country into an affordability challenge for many people. But the way to tackle that is to provide opportunities, is to provide investments, to provide growth and opportunities for workers. And I think, if you ask me people see, they said you always see the glass half full, but to go back to where we started, I don't know too many jurisdictions who have so many tools in their toolbox to provide the growth that is going to be relevant for the 21st century, from energy to critical mineral, to access to market and export, which is what 65% of what you see in the province, to key in terms of the aerospace industry, which is growing, to logistics, to what we can do in the ocean and energy economy. So that's why you see me so excited and so optimistic this morning here in St. John's, because you have it all. And under your leadership and the Premier and all my colleagues, I think that we'll be able to seize the moment.
There's our theme for next year. We have it all. Somehow our clock just went from 8 minutes to 2 minutes, so there must be a glitch in the system. So I'm going to talk a little fast. And I had to ask about ITC. I was a former finance minister too, and everybody asks you for everything. So I'm just going to leave it there and rephrase it as not an investment tax credit, but just a way to give you more of a return on investment. as you've gotten with Hibernia in the past, and in terms of corporate income tax spending, consumer income tax, you'll get your money back if we do it. I can guarantee it. I've done the numbers. Just moving on quickly, for the rest of our program this week, we will be talking about onshore wind, offshore wind, carbon capture and storage, more that we have here. We have the highest number of potential for storing carbon offshore in the entire world. We've done studies with a company out of Paris, France. How do you see the federal government playing a role? Actually saw an announcement you did moments ago with Angler, and that's about carbon capture and storage. You want to elaborate a little bit more on how you can help with that, and then we'll have to clue it up because we're running out of time and I have so many more questions.
Is there anyone here who expect us to be on time? Really? I don't know who's
Not
playing
your
with
staff.
the timer, but we're not getting off stage, by the way. There's too many good news. No, you're right. We announced 4 things this morning, but we got carried over by all our discussion. Yes, carbon capture and storage. I think this is how, with the Prime Minister, we said we should focus on technology. I think technology is our friend to be that responsible and sustainable energy partner to the world. I think Bay du Nord is a great example of that. You know, this is going to be one of the lowest emitting new field in its category in the world. And it just shows to the world that we know how to do things here. We get it. We understand that you can grow and at the same time having technology to capture carbon. And Canada is seen as a leader in the world in many, many ways, and we've been attracting significant investment. That's why, you know, as finance minister, we put that tax credit for CCUS to make sure that we can have these kind of investment that's going to allow us to grow our investment in the oil and gas sector, but at the same time, finding a way to capture carbon. And I think, you know, what I like with the people here is that I'm always amazed. I was also at Blue Drop yesterday, which is one of our very own here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Believe it or not, company which started with a grant of $13,000, and now they employ 1,000 people. As a finance minister, I like the ratio. That's the kind of ratio I'm looking for. 13,000, 1,000 employee after. It's just the kind of innovation. And, you know, people here know how to roll up their sleeves. They understand, yeah, the win, but there's also the win of change. And I think we're seeing that now. So to your point, we're going to do everything we can on our side to make this jurisdiction as the most competitive I can imagine in terms of new investment. The tone at the top of the Prime Minister, and some of you may have heard this Davos speech, I think he had the courage to say loud what a lot of people were saying privately, and I think it really put Canada at the forefront of the global agenda. I think the events in the world are also calling for Canada to play a bigger role. You know, it's nice to talk about an energy superpower, but now we need to put that in practice at speed and scale we've not seen in generation. These moments usually are, you know, I always say when the window of opportunity is big, usually it's time limited. So people are looking at us and say, okay, now Canada, where do you stand? What can you do? And I think there's a real openness from our partners. And I'll say Europe here because of the proximity to Europe, although with the Panama Canal, you can also go to Asia. But I would say our partners in Europe are definitely looking for us to play a bigger role. So I would say, you know, I know we need eventually to close, but I would say let's seize the moment. These kind of moments and conferences like that allow us to put Canada on the front foot. I would say let's be ambitious. You know, my job is always to kind of try to raise the level of ambition and how we're doing and where we position Canada. And let's together really make this reality of being a key trusted partner in this new energy ecosystem in the world. And I think future generations are going to look back at us that we have done at a time where people were talking about great challenges, that we've been able to seize the opportunities to put St. John's, to put this province, and to put Canada at the forefront of the energy future. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for being to St. John's. And thank you again, Charlene, for your great leadership. And thank you for a bit of sunshine as well. It's the 2nd of June. Merci tout le monde. Thank you, everyone.